it went too fast. Well, at least I got your number. I guess I'll see you next summer.
Hello there, welcome to Darla's Book Club. I'm Darla. This is a club for everyone and anyone ready to discuss books, and more books. I love books, and I'm sure you do too. Traveling to unknown lands, delving into our history, admiring poetry and language. Oh, I'm getting carried away, aren't I? Sometimes we're curious to learn about a book, whether we've read it or not. So with that, let's get to today's Darla's Book Club discussion.
The 101 Dalmatians is a 1956 children's novel by Dodie Smith about the kidnapping of a family of Dalmatian puppies. It was originally serialized in Woman's Day as The Great Dog Robbery and details the adventures of two Dalmatians named Pongo and Mrs. as they rescue their puppies from a fur farm. A 1967 sequel, The Starlight Barking, continues from the end of the novel. Pongo and Mrs. are a pair of Dalmatians who live with the newly married Mr. and Mrs. Dearly and their two nannies, Nanny Cook and Nanny Butler. Mr. Dearly is a financial wizard who has been granted lifelong tax exemption and lent a house on the outer circle in Regent's Park in return for wiping out the government debt. The dogs consider the humans their pets, but allow the humans to think that they are the owners. One day, while walking Pongo and Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. Dearly have a chance meeting with an old schoolmate of Mrs. Dearly, Cruella DeVille, a very wealthy woman so fixated on fur clothing that she married a furrier and forces him to keep his fur collection in their home so she can wear the pieces whenever she likes. She admires the two dogs and expresses a desire to have a Dalmatian skin coat. Later, Mrs. gives birth to a litter of 15 puppies. Concerned that Mrs. will not be able to feed them all, the humans join in to help. As Mrs. Dearly looks for a canine wet nurse, she finds an exhausted liver-spotted Dalmatian in the middle of the road in the pouring rain. She has the dog treated by a vet, learns that she has recently given birth, and names her Perdita, meaning lost. Perdita helps to nurse the pups and becomes a member of the family. She tells Pongo about her lost love prince and the resulting litter of puppies, which were sold by her neglectful owner. She had run away looking for those puppies. Cruella happened to be in the house when the puppies started to arrive and had expressed a desire to buy them, which was rebuffed. After she pays a second visit to the house and is told again that the Dearlys have no intention of putting the puppies up for sale, she hires thieves, brothers Jasper and Saul Badon, to steal them for her.
I love books. I love books. I could read all day, but learning the facts surrounding them is even more fascinating. Let's continue.
The humans fail to trace them, but through the Twilight Barking, a forum of communication in which dogs can relay messages to each other across the country, the dogs track them down to Hell Hall, the ancestral home of the DeVille family in Suffolk. Pongo and Mrs. try to tell their owners the word Suffolk, but they cannot make the S sound. The dogs decide to find the puppies themselves, leaving Perdita to look after the Dearlys. After an eventful journey across the English countryside, with food and accommodation along the way arranged by dogs through the Barking Network, they meet the Colonel, an old English sheepdog. He shows them Hell Hall and tells them its history. They get inside the mansion and discover that there are 97 puppies in Hell Hall, including Pongo and Mrs. own 15. Fearing police investigation, Cruella DeVille arrives and tells the Badon brothers, whom she left in charge of Hell Hall, that they must slaughter and skin the dogs as soon as possible. Pongo and Mrs. realize they must rescue all of the puppies immediately, and they escape the night before Christmas Eve. One puppy, Cadpig, is a runt and too weak to walk the long distance from Suffolk to London. So Tommy, the Colonel's 2-year-old owner, lends her a toy farm cart. One litter of 8 puppies is just the right age for 2 of its members to fit its shaft, so they pull it in shifts. they are nearly captured by gypsies, and one of the barking network dogs points out how conspicuous they are and helps them break into a chimney sweep's establishment, where they roll in soot to disguise themselves. They travel across the fields and spend part of an evening in a cathedral. Cruella nearly overtakes them when they are forced to return to the road, but they hide in an empty removal van at the invitation of a Staffordshire Terrier whose pets own the van and are returning to London that night.
Wow, I didn't know all that. Did you? It's incredible to learn where ideas come from and how they end up and where they end up. Let's keep this book club moving along.
Once the dogs arrive in London, Cruella's Persian cat, who has been longing to avenge her many litters of kittens, all of which Cruella drowned, sees an opportunity and lets the dogs into Cruella's house, where they destroy her whole stock of unpaid-for furs. The Dalmatians then return to the Dearlys' house. Pondo and Mrs. bark until Mr. Dearly opens the door, whereupon the whole mass of puppies streams inside and rolls on the carpet to remove the soot from their coats. The Dearlys recognize them and send out for steaks to feed them. The litter that pulled Catbig's cart is proven to be Perdita's litter by Prince. Mr. Dearly finds out where the puppies had been when he discovers a label on the toy cart, which contains Tommy's name and address. The Dearlys also place advertisements seeking the owners of the other puppies, but it turns out that they had all been bought rather than stolen as the Dearlys were. Perdita's former owner, who never really cared for her, is happy to sell her to the Dearlys upon hearing the story. Cruella's now homeless cat drops by and is invited to stay with the news that the destruction of her husband's fur business has forced Cruella to leave the country and put Hell Hall up for sale. When the Dearlys visit Suffolk to return Tommy's cart, they realize that with 97 puppies and 3 adult Dalmatians, a larger home would be a good idea, so Mr. Dearly buys the hall with money he has been given by the government for sorting out another tax problem. He proposes to use it to start a dynasty of Dalmatians and a dynasty of Dearlys to take care of them. Finally, Perdita's lost love, Prince, turns up. His owners see his love for Perdita and allow him to stay with the Dearlys and become their 101st Dalmatian. Disney adapted the novel into an animated film, released to cinemas on 25 January 1961 as 101 Dalmatians. It became the 10th highest-grossing film of 1961 and one of the studio's most popular films of the decade. It was reissued to cinemas 4 times in 1969, 1979, 1985, and 1991. The 1991 reissue was the 20th highest-earning film of the year for domestic earnings. It was remade into a live-action movie in 1996. In both the live-action and animated adaptations, the nannies were reduced to one single housekeeper. Mrs. was renamed Perdita, and other characters, such as many of the other dogs, Prince, Tommy, Cruella's cat, and Cruella's husband, were omitted.
Did you know all of that? Didn't think so, and we're just getting started.
In the animated film, Pondo and Mrs. Owner's last names were changed to Radcliffe from Dearly, and in the live-action film, Cruella, portrayed by Glenn Close, appears as the spoiled magnate of an haute couture fashion house, House of DeVille. Disney kept the book's characters Horace and Jasper Badon in both versions, but represented them as the thieves hired by Cruella to steal Pongo and Mrs. Puppies. In the novel, Horace is named Saul, and they are merely caretakers, the puppies having been stolen by hired professional thieves some days before. Disney later created an animated television series starring 3 of the puppies, Lucky, Rolly, and Catpig, and a second series that stars mostly descendants of Pongo and Perdita. Disney also released a sequel film for each of their film versions, 101 Dalmatians 2 and 102 Dalmatians. However, both were largely criticized for poor story and lack of originality. The novel has been adapted for the stage by Debbie Issett for the Belgrade Theatre, Coventry in 2000, followed by productions at the Royal and Derngate. Northampton in 2007 and Birmingham Repertory Theatre in 2017 by Bryony Lavery for the Chichester Youth Theatre in 2014, and was devised by the company directed by Sally Cookson for Tobacco Factory Theatres in 2014. The novel was also adapted into a 2009 musical which opened in Minneapolis prior to a U.S. tour. Another stage musical adaptation was due to open at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre in 2020, before being postponed to 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The wonderful world of books never disappoints. Let's keep talking.
In 1996, the BBC adapted Dodie Smith's novel into a full-cast musical audio dramatization, starring Patricia Hodge as Cruella. This version is very faithful to the source material, in that it has all the characters. However, events are slightly changed. Cruella's husband argues with her more than in the novel, and they do not leave London after the destruction of the first docks, nor do the Dearlys ever find out she was the mastermind. Furthermore, Perdita and Prince's story is greatly abridged. Mrs. Willow helps the Colonel attack the Battons to prevent them following the Dalmatians, and the White Cat does not join the family until after the move to Suffolk. Amazon Audible later released this production as an audiobook, available for streaming online or through the app. The book gained a positive response from critics. Dorothy Gladys Dodie Smith was an English children's novelist and playwright, known best for the novel The 101 Dalmatians, 1956. Other works include I Capture the Castle, 1948, and The Starlight Barking, 1967. The 101 Dalmatians was adapted into a 1961 animated film and a 1996 live-action film, both produced by Disney. Her novel I Capture the Castle was adapted into a 2003 film version. I Capture the Castle was voted number 82 as one of the nation's 100 best-loved novels by the British public as part of the BBC's The Big Read 2003. Smith was born on 3 May 1896 in Whitefield, near Bury in Lancashire, England. She was an only child. Her parents were Ernest and Ella Smith. Ernest was a bank manager. He died in 1898 when Dodie was 2 years old. Dodie and her mother moved to Old Trafford to live with her grandparents, William and Margaret Ferber. Dodie's childhood home, known as Kingston House, was at 609 Stretford Road. It faced the Manchester Ship Canal, and she lived with her mother, maternal grandparents, 2 aunts, and 3 uncles. In her autobiography, Look Back with Love, 1974, she credits her grandfather William as one of 3 reasons she became a playwright. He was an avid theatergoer, and they had long talks about Shakespeare and melodrama. The second reason, her uncle Harold Ferber, an amateur actor, replays with her and introduced her to contemporary drama.
Aren't book clubs the best? I love spending time talking about them, when I'm not reading, of course. Now, our discussion continues. Here we go.
Thirdly, her mother had wanted to be an actress, an ambition frustrated except for walk-on parts, once in the company of Sarah Bernhardt. Smith wrote her first play at the age of 10, and she began acting in minor roles during her teens at the Manchester Athenaeum Dramatic Society. Presently, there is a blue plaque commemorating the building where Dorothy grew up. The formative years of Dorothy's childhood were spent at this house. In 1910, Ella remarried and moved to London with her new husband and the 14-year-old Dodie, who attended school in both Manchester and at St. Paul's Girls' School. In 1914, Dodie entered the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Her first role came in Arthur Wing Penrose's play Playgores. Other roles after Rada included a Chinese girl in Mr. Wu, a parlor maid in Ye Gods, and a young mother in Niobe, which was directed by Basil Dean, who would later buy her play Autumn Crocus. She was also in the Portsmouth Repertory Theatre, traveled with a YMCA company to entertain troops in France during World War I, toured with the French comedy French Leave, and appeared as Anne in Galsworthy's play The Pigeon at the Everman Theatre and at a festival in Zurich, Switzerland. During her mother's illness, while dying of breast cancer, Dodie and her mother became devotees of Christian Science. Even though Smith had sold a movie script, Schoolgirl Rebels, using the pseudonym Charles Henry Percy, and written a one-act play, British Talent, that premiered at the Three Arts Club in 1924, she still had a hard time finding steady work. In 1923, she accepted a job in Heel & Sons furniture store in London and became the toy buyer and mistress of the chairman, Ambrose Heel. She wrote her first staged play, Autumn Crocus, in 1931 using the pseudonym C.L. Anthony. Its success and the discovery of her identity by journalists inspired the newspaper headline, Shopro Writes Play. The show starred Fay Compton and Francis Lederer.
That's a good point, don't you think? It's like they say, you can't judge a book by its cover. This story keeps getting better and better.
Smith's fourth play, Call It a Day, was acted by the Theatre Guild on 28 January 1936 and ran for 194 performances. It ran in London for 509 performances, the longest run of any of Smith's plays to date. American critic Joseph Wood Crutch compared it favorably to George S. Kaufman and Edna Ferber's play Dinner at 8 and Edward Knobloch's Grand Hotel. He said the London production stays pretty consistently on the level of comedy and imposes upon its brittle structure no greater emotional weight than that structure is capable of bearing. The success of Call It a Day enabled Smith to purchase the Barretts, a cottage near the village of Finchingfield, Essex. Her next play, Bonnet Over the Windmill 1937, was not as successful. It concerns three aspiring young actresses and their landlady, a middle-aged former music hall performer, and the young women's attempts to attract the attention of a playwright and a theater producer with hopes of obtaining dramatic roles. Her next play, Dear Octopus 1938, featured Dame Marie Tempest and Sir John Gielgud. The unusual title refers to a toast in the play, to the family, that dear octopus from whose tentacles we never quite escape, nor, in our inmost hearts, ever quite wish to. Brooks Atkinson termed Smith a domestic panoramatist and compared her to many English novelists, from Samuel Richardson to Archibald Marshall. He also described her as the appointed recorder of the English family. The production in London ran for 376 performances, compared to that in New York of only 53. When Smith traveled to America to cast Dear Octopus, she brought with her Alec Macbeth Beasley, who had also worked at Heels and had become her longtime friend and business manager.
I'm just a lover for words, aren't you? I think they call it a logophile. But this isn't all about me. Let's learn some more.
The two married in 1939. She would not have another play staged in London until 1952, though Lovers and Friends did play at the Plymouth Theatre in 1943. The show featured Catherine Cornell and Raymond Massey. Smith lived for many years in Dorset Square, Marylebone, London, where a plaque now commemorates her occupation. During the 1940s, Smith and Beasley relocated to the United States to avoid legal difficulties of his being a conscientious objector. She felt homesick for Britain, which inspired her first novel, written in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, named I Capture the Castle 1948. She and Beasley also spent time in Beverly Hills, Malibu, and Wilton, Connecticut. During their American interlude, the couple became friends with writers Christopher Isherwood, Charles Brackett, and John Van Druten. In her memoirs, Smith credits Beasley with making the suggestion to Van Druten that he adapt Isherwood's Sally Bowles story Goodbye to Berlin into a play. The Van Druten play, I Am a Camera, later became the musical Cabaret. In her memoirs, Smith acknowledges having received writing advice from her friend, the novelist A.J. Cronin. Smith's first playback in London, Letter from Paris, was an adaptation of Henry James's short novel The Reverberator. She used the adapting style of William Archibald's play The Innocents adapted from The Turn of the Screw, and Ruth and Augustus Coates's play The Heiress adapted from Washington Square. In the 1970s, she lived in Stambourne, Essex.
Nothing like curling up in bed with a good book, don't you think? Just warms my heart and jumpstarts my mind. Let's keep discussing this.
Smith died in 1990, 3 years after Beasley in Uttlesford, North Essex, England. She was cremated and her ashes scattered to the wind. She had named Julian Barnes as her literary executor, a job she thought would not be much work. Barnes writes of the complicated task in his essay Literary Executions, revealing among other things how he secured the return of the film rights to I Capture the Castle, which had been owned by Disney since 1949. Smith's personal papers are housed in Boston University's Howard Gottlieb Archival Research Center and include manuscripts, photographs, artwork, and correspondence, including letters from Christopher Isherwood and John Gielgud. Smith and Beasley loved dogs and kept Dalmatians as pets. At one point, the couple had 9 of them. The first was named Pongo, which became the name Smith used for the canine protagonist of her The 101 Dalmatians novel. Smith had the idea for the novel when one of her friends observed a group of her Dalmatians and said those dogs would make a lovely fur coat. The novel has been adapted by Disney twice, an animated film in 1961 called 101 Dalmatians, and a live-action film in 1996 called 101 Dalmatians. Although both of the Disney films spawned a sequel film, 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's London Adventure, and 102 Dalmatians, neither sequel has any connection to Smith's own sequel, The Starlight Barking.
And that just about wraps up this one. So what did you think? I had an absolute blast talking to you today. I hope you'll join me for a more fascinating discussion about books, and more books. I'm so glad you've become a member of Darla's Book Club. Feel free to hop on the couch and talk novels with me anytime. So I'll see you soon, and after all, tomorrow is another day.